talk to me real quick about your first acquisition. Why plumbing?
I was a lender on the other side of the table, making loans from like 1 to 15 million. I heard it was a thing to go buy a business.
And then you said toilets.
Hearing that you could buy a business where like you work 8 to 4 and that's it, I just like didn't even realize that was a decision I was making by buying a plumbing business instead of a marine upholstery business.
If you got the opportunity tomorrow for a $1.5 million, oh God, turf business to add onto your plumbing company, and they were selling it to you at a 3x multiple of 600, are you in?
I am so not into that.
Welcome back to Jackquisitions, the one and only place where you get your acquisition information. Sorry, guys, I'm just messing around with the intro. But today I have an awesome episode lined up. We have Peter De Baptiste. Did I butcher that?
That was pretty close. Most people get the first name right, at least.
Yeah, I did the old switcheroo here. Peter is the owner and recent acquirer a few years back of Joe Cole Plumbing down in Florida. How are you doing today, Peter?
Doing good, man. Excited to be here with a legend of scrappy acquisitions.
We just are finishing the best April we've ever had. 55% year over year organic growth. Really just a huge thanks to Service Scalers for being our marketing partner in that. A ton of that growth came from both paid and organic SEO efforts. We did a ton of work on our SEO with Service Scalers, really strategizing and working on that about a year and a half ago. And the results have been creeping up over the past about year, really started to go crazy over the last few months as we're starting to see multiple 6 figures of revenue attributed to our website. And that's from their work on our SEO. On top of that, the management of paid has just been absolutely huge. Year to date, we're up 30-something%. April alone was 55, and we're just super grateful for Service Scalers in that partnership. So if you want to learn more about how they helped us, make sure you check out servicescalers.com.
You called me a few weeks ago, and that's why I was like, I have to get him on the podcast, because we were talking about you and your plans in the near future to acquire another business. Why do you like pain so much?
It's just fun. It's like the ultimate challenge. Coming into an industry you know nothing about and figuring it out. It's just, I don't know. It's pretty awesome. It's a big challenge, and there's obviously like the financial opportunity behind it, but I just also kind of like doing it.
I was going to say, like, there is a financial aspect there of owning a secondary vertical, right? And so when we were discussing it, you were saying, hey, I'm in plumbing. I'm doing well in plumbing, but, you know, I see this HVAC over here and it looks juicy. Why are you looking currently to purchase an HVAC business?
Well, I've been looking. So I bought the business coming up on 3 years ago. I've kind of been looking since I started, but a little bit more aggressively now that I feel like we're kind of well equipped to add another business in, in terms of our office running well. But in my eyes, like, I'd be happy to find another plumbing company. But in my eyes, like, kind of the perfect acquisition is to bring on another trade. And I don't want to start from scratch if I don't have to. So, go find an HVAC shop that's got, 6 trucks on the road and enough spin where, the phones ring every day and you don't have to go and chase that from scratch and hire, if you started from ground zero, you got one guy on the road and he's doing everything and you're trying to make sure he gets his hours and trying to make sure you're drumming up business. So I like the idea of buying something existing and putting them together, and that be the way that we branch into a new trade. But I'm also looking at, I'd love, another plumbing company as well. We got plenty of runway left in plumbing.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, so we had a very unique experience, is that we started like from ground up, and then we ran that for 3 months, and then we bought a large plumbing company to tuck in, because you're right, it takes a really unique individual who can kind of self-manage, but also while they're doing that, they have to help build price book. And the startup game, when you're trying to start up a brand new vertical, can be super difficult. And then once you purchase a company, you realize, oh, this is also super difficult. But you're right. The phones are ringing day one. You're bringing in revenue at high rates or hopefully at higher rates. And it kind of is a launching pad to really get you moving. So talk to me real quick about your first acquisition. Why plumbing? Were you tied to this geographical region? Like, just how did it come about?
So I grew up in South Florida. I lived down here. I bounced around a little bit during my college years, but this is home. I got a family now. And I knew I wanted to be in South Florida. And the whole buying a business thing kind of came about, I don't know, a couple of years before I actually did it. I had a childhood friend move back from California, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing called the Search Fund. I've been, meeting all these people. I'm going to go raise capital from a bunch of investors, and they're going to, pay me a salary to be a one-man private equity shop." And I was like, that sounds insane. What is that?
Yeah.
And then, I kind of got the download on it, and it really fit my background. So I started my career in banking. I did 4 years as like a lower middle market lender at a bank. So basically, like, once you get beyond the SBA, that was my world. So I was a lender on the other side of the table, making loans from like 1 to 15 million. And then I worked at a company called Delivery Dudes, ended up running it as president. I was there for 6 or 7 years. So really got, we grew the business from like 25 employees to 125. We had 1,000 independent contractor drivers, like Uber drivers. So it really went from like small business to medium business during that time. And really just kind of had my, felt good about or at least good enough about understanding the finance side of it and good enough about being able to manage people. So I heard it was a thing to go buy a business, and then I ended up doing it.
And then you said toilets.
Yeah.
I'm going home services. Like, well, why toilets?
So I was looking in South Florida. So it was a small geography. So I had to be, wide on industry. But
was it always home service though, at least?
No, it started off as like really wide. It was basically like everything but restaurants. Was kind of like how you start. And then, I gravitated towards home services, or more broadly, like guys and trucks businesses. I got pretty close to buying a mulch blowing company. So they basically operated like a small fleet they're like the size of garbage trucks, and they blast in like commercial quantities of mulch for like golf courses and HOAs, and they have a bunch of municipal contracts. It's a really, really interesting business, and it'd be a great lifestyle business. So I got pretty close on that one. And then I just, I looked at a handful like fencing, roofing, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, all sort of like trades businesses. And so I wasn't targeting plumbing, but I'm glad I found it. I really love it. It's a lot of fun. I learn something new every day, and it's just kind of it's a cool space to be in. So that was
the irony is everyone in HVAC and HVAC. Now that I've done HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, we do a little bit of electrical, not that much. But point being is all the electricians and the HVAC guys are like, "Hey, we'll do anything you want, Jack, except plumbing."
Yeah.
Because there's a huge stigma right there. It's like, hey, I'm not going to touch a sewer drain. Like, it's just not that they're below it, just like, hey, there's a different breed of plumbers. I love plumbers, but it is a different breed, and I've had to run some of those calls, and yeah, it's as bad sometimes as they say it is.
There was a great tangent, but there's a big like plumbing community on Instagram. Like Boston Plumbing Monsters is this guy, and he started this whole debate last year of like drain cleaning's not plumbing, and the whole like plumbing influencer community was like fighting about does drain cleaning count as plumbing? Like, are you a plumber if you clean sewers?
Yeah, right. Even the plumbers don't want it. Too funny. So let me ask you a question. Now that you've been in the business of, hey, buying businesses, you've seen a ton of businesses. How long was that search? Just real quick.
I did it, I think, about as fast as you could do it. Mine was 9 months start to finish.
No, that's not. I mean, that's a good, healthy search in my mind, because that's around where mine was. I started, and it was about 7 or 8 months later we closed as well, or we found the business, and then 2 months later we closed. So probably, yeah, almost a year total. But you've got to see the gambit of everything from. I'm bet, knowing you, that you looked at a CIM on a restaurant, just at least one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, of course.
There was like the chain. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was a breakfast joint, and it was back in Napa where I lived, and I was like, it looks so good. But I mean, we were looking at things from breakfast places to lumber brokers to, the whole thing. I almost bought an appliance repair business that was beautiful. I still love it. Still talk to the old owner today. But that being said, now that you've seen so much, what is your dream business?
I mean, I like my business, but when I talk to people who are getting in and, starting to look for businesses, like my big push, there's a couple factors that people don't talk about as much, and that I certainly didn't give enough points to. And so my overall, I love pushing people to what I would call the tier 2 or tier 3 home services businesses. Fencing and roofing were at one point in that bucket, but now they're getting gobbled up by private equity. So all of a sudden, fencing, which started off as a not very hot industry, is now kind of a hot industry. But an example that, that I gave to somebody is I got AstroTurf put into my lawn, and it was so unsophisticated, getting quotes and getting people to answer the phone and getting them, people showed up and then spent an hour and a half with me and then never sent me a quote, even when I followed up. So the competition, the bar is still really low. You're not dealing with sophisticated people. And I got my turf done, and who isn't happy after getting AstroTurf looks perfect every time it's finished. It looks flawless. Every customer ends up happy. So that dynamic was one that I didn't really think about. Was are you dealing with upset people all day, or are you dealing with happy people? Right? It's dentists are the number one suicide profession because everybody's miserable going to the dentist. And it's you're dealing with people are sad to see you. So yeah. It's kind of, and in plumbing, it's all emergencies. No one's
a catch-22.
Because at the end of the day, unless you're upgrading somebody's system, for the most part, you're just taking their money to make their house work the way it did 24 hours ago.
I think of us, Peter, first off, how dare you? Second off, I think of us as heroes to people's houses. So maybe that's why I'm always so happy, is because we come in, you've been sitting in the heat for 24 hours. Yeah, you have to pay some money, but we come in, back up and running. Happy. But yes, you're right. We're like the grim reapers of household appliances or household fixtures. Is you only call us when your sewers are overflowing, your toilet isn't working, or your house is too hot or too cold. Yeah. And I definitely get that. But let's talk more about this tier 2, tier 3, some examples of this, because it's an interesting perspective that I know I didn't think about when I was first getting into it. I went right for where private equity was going because I figured, hey, that's where the tailwinds will be. But you're saying, hey, now that I'm in one of these spaces, you're looking more at these kind of increased fragmentation. There's maybe some less sophistication, less tools. And so what are some great examples? You said turf business, which is I would say tier 1 would be just commercial and residential landscaping, right? And tier 2 is specifically all you do is turf.
Yeah, and specifically the guys that I was interacting with only do turf for residential homeowners, not new construction projects, right? Mm-hmm. And so another, I'll give you an example, and this is an even bigger factor that I really underappreciated. So I had my friend who introduced me to this space, he bought a home healthcare business a year before I did. And his phone rings on the weekend, hey, your nurse didn't show up. My grandma needs help. His business is 24/7. Plumbing is 24/7. I've got a lot of people, so thankfully I'm a little bit less 24/7 than I was when I started, but like it is all emergencies all the time. And then a year after me, a third friend of ours bought a marine canvas business. So he makes like T-tops and reupholsters cushions for boats.
Yeah.
And that, it was a really small one. It was like, people talk about buying a job. Like he was buying a job. It had like 1.5 employees. But after a little while, I was like talking to him and I was like, oh, hey, so like, what do you do? What do you do for after hours stuff? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, what, like, he's like, my day ends at 4:00. He's like, there is no problem that anyone has desire to have handled after hours. He's like, I go in and I leave and no one's complaining if their thing is delayed by a day. Like, and it just blew me away because I was like in the business for so long, working so many hours. And I was like, what do you mean your phone doesn't ring at 8 p.m. on Friday night? And he's just like, yeah, like it's just a low stress business. Like everybody's chill.
Yeah.
And it blew me away. Like, what do you mean there are no emergencies? So I think like that is one that definitely isn't, everybody says like, shadow the owner for a day, like get to know. And like, I knew that the guys I was buying it from worked a lot, but man, I just like hearing that you could buy a business where like you work 8 to 4 and that's it. I just like didn't even realize that was a decision I was making by buying a plumbing business instead of a marine upholstery business.
I think that actually, right, that's an entire industry that I think fits your theory of these tier 2, tier 3 businesses really, really well, is when you go and you look at canvas businesses, right, where homeowners are putting up shade structures or playgrounds are putting up shade structures. It's this really niche market. Even businesses, right, restaurants, they want the shade on the front or the shade on their back patio. I could see that would maybe be a small emergency service component, but it's nowhere near what you would see in kind of a home service business. I remember looking at a few of those. The numbers are great, as well as I also looked at a marine canvassing business in the Gulf a long, long time ago, but they focused more on sail repair. So they would do sales and repair on sails. And I always just imagine you rip a sail, you buy a new one, but obviously they're so expensive that they go through and they stitch them up and make them look nice and everything. So really interesting businesses. And I think that those transcend outside of those kind of quirky ones too. Cause like I view that, and we've been trying to do something like that in our business from a startup perspective. We tried to buy a tier 2 recently, but the guy wanted way too much. But I look at that. We have one locally called the Hot Water Heater Pros. And you might love that because there's no such thing as a hot water heater. It's just a water heater. The hot is a unnecessary word, but from an SEO perspective, the guy knew what he was doing.
That's hilarious because every plumber is like, that guy doesn't know his stuff. And he's over there just like, who cares?
Yeah, but from a tier 2 perspective, all he does is water heater, low margin, high volume. They focused all on marketing, and it's all brand marketing because like you need a hot water heater, you go to the Hot Water Heater Pros. You don't call a plumber, you call them. And they do decently well in our area, and they don't have to spend very much money at all on marketing, which is extremely nice. And from a water heater perspective, I've seen that more often than not as people, I heard an ad from Southern California the other day on my Pandora, which was the Repipe Boys or something like that. All they do is that, like, it feels like the industry, these tier 2s are like they're segmenting out basements or hot water heaters, or now I'm going to say it and get in trouble, or repipes, or just like this single industry or single SKU, if you will, and turning it into like their only business, and it's only the high value tickets.
Yeah, there's a guy by us who does pretty much exclusively tunneling, like sewer replacement by tunneling, and he does it himself. There's like a plumbing company, but a lot of what he does is like subbed out from other plumbing shops, to the point where he like got rid of the name plumbing on all of his trucks, and now it just says tunneling.
Yeah,
like Bob's Tunneling. I don't know if I would love to be in that business, um, but it kind of follows that same thing. Like, yeah, you find your little thing, and you're not in like, a multi-billion-dollar total addressable market, but talk about having your lifestyle business, and there's a lot of weird ways to get there.
What's the downside of buying a tier two though? I mean, I have something in mind, but I'm curious what you think the downside would be.
I think the downside is scale. You can only get so big, and the downside is exit opportunities, because if you don't have scale, who wants to buy it for a crazy multiple? HVAC is enormous. It's fragmented. It has like recurring revenue components, all this stuff. It checks a lot of boxes. Um, so like, yeah, people are going to go and pay double digit EBITDA multiples for it. And because you can grow it so big, and you can grow it through, crazy acquisition strategies. If you go find like the mulch blowing company or the marine upholstery company or whatever, like, yeah, you can turn one of those into a $10 million business, but like not 100.
Yeah, definitely scale is an issue, especially for single SKU, right? Like American Leak Detectors actually is a great example of this. They had one of those fragmented tier two, and that was their thing. They would do leak detection for plumbing companies, and it went super well, right? They grew a huge brand, national brand, and then they had to scale. And so what did they do? They went and said, hey, not only are we going to do leak detection, but now we're going to do plumbing too. And so what happened to them is a very interesting case study. Is they got wiped out. Like we were talking to one of their main sales reps the other day, and he was saying, yeah, it's got really bad at some points, because as they tried to scale this tier two into a tier one again by doing tier one items, they lost their entire customer base, right? Because as a plumber, I'm not going to give them my work. They're going to undercut me, right? They're going to find the leak. They're already there. They're just going to sell the fix. I'm not going to call them anymore. And so you find that I think scale is a huge one. The other one that I have in mind, that becomes an issue really early on, is you can get crushed, absolutely crushed by large competitors. Like the tier one large competitors, they have the resources because they have scale. So they have, their marketing dollars could equal your top line revenue. And so, right, the mulch blowing business, for example, if you had a tier one ginormous landscaping company that owned South Florida, theoretically they could go and say, hey, we're doing mulch blowing now, and we're going to dump a ton of resources into this, couple $100,000, and now we are going to steal those contracts away from you, and we are going to be the new HOA owners. So it's an interesting dichotomy of it's good, but if I feel like if it gets too popular, right, someone's going to come in and try to sweep it out from under you.
Yeah,
Same with turf blowing.
If you succeed,
or turf
you'll
installing.
start attracting more eyeballs to.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you just want to fly under the radar as a lifestyle business for years and years.
Yeah. I mean, but the reality is, like, look around. Like, I don't know. Most of these guys have been doing it for decades.
Yep.
And don't seem to be going anywhere.
Yeah, I say that, but
I went through that exact thing at Delivery Dudes. We were a competitor with Uber Eats and DoorDash, and like, we were, outcompeted by people 1,000 times our size. So that was fun. I wouldn't want to do that again.
Yeah, exactly.
That was one of my fears about plumbing, was like, hey, there's this big wave in the industry, and like, are we on the, which part of the wave are we on? Are we about to be on the good part of the wave, or are we about to be on the bad part of the wave? Because at my last business, we missed the wave, and we were on the bad part of the wave, and it was super not fun for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think the waves are different though when it comes to home service industries, right? Yeah, they had like the same boom in the 1990s where PE came in, they grew big and crashed, and it took 20 years for the valuations to go ridiculous again. But all that being said, I mean, in that same time period, we had multiple $100 million businesses being formed, and like this giant influx into the industry, because it's not going anywhere. I don't view this as an Uberable. I think you were talking about that. I was speaking with you offline about it. Just, it's so hard, and Uber barely made it, right? That
was somebody else, but that was a very That was a great comment.
Oh, was that Uzi?
Yeah, he was like,
Okay.
anytime somebody
Yeah,
talks
yeah, yeah.
about being the Uber of X, he's like, Uber was the Uber of Uber, and they barely made it.
They barely made it. Not to mention, yeah, not high skilled labor. One of the most common and expensive mistakes that I see in acquisitions in the home service space is not getting serious about accounting. Whether you're buying a business or you're already running one, you need the right financial partner to save you time, money, and headaches. That's why we partnered with AppleTree Business Services. They are a one-stop shop that'll help you get through the due diligence process, but then they'll partner with you after to help you out with payroll and bookkeeping and taxes. They know home services. They're fluent in tools like ServiceTitan and HouseCall Pro. If you're tired of the surprise tax bills or an accountant who ghosts you when you really need them, AppleTree's the upgrade you deserve. Listeners of the show can get a free tax and financial review, and if you're buying a business, they'll give you 10% off quality of earnings. Just head on over to appletreebusiness.com, talk to Patrick, click the link, let them know Jack sends you, and they will take care of you. Well, I have actually an old CIM, speaking of being on the market and looking at CIMs for a long time, that I'm out of my NDA on and I can talk about. So turf businesses, man. I'm excited to actually look at one in real time.
I've never looked at one. I just liked the experience of getting my turf in, and I was like, all right, this will be good.
I don't know if you've ever heard of some of my older podcasts, but dude, I like my version of turf is, I just wanted to drill wells. Like, I was a well driller because I was in California at the height of 2008 when it was like the biggest drought, and there was wells going in all over California, like, and it was just this giant gold rush. And me and my buddy were going to buy a rig and just start drilling wells, and we never did. He ended up getting his master's degree and then went and drilled wells, and I went off and did some facilities maintenance and worked in wineries. So much better choice on my end, but still, like, that's my turf, and that's what I always like asking people.
Was there a boom and bust in the well business?
Huge. Because the minute that it rained in California again, which was like circa around like 2010, 2011, I think it was when it finally got a huge storm that filled up all the aquifers and everything like that. But California has some really interesting agricultural laws around well drilling where they really don't have a huge permitting process, and the depths that you find water are extremely deep, so it's very, very lucrative, especially in the Central Valley where they're drilling like freaking 24-inch diameter wells, and it's like ridiculous amounts per foot, and you have to go down 1,000 feet. Whereas like Tennessee now, if I wanted to drill a well, I can go like over here is like 12 feet. Like the water table's not very, it may be 100, I don't know, but not very low comparatively.
That's wild. That's like some serious blue collar work.
Yeah.
Like, what is the HVAC is like the white collar of blue collar? That sounds like the blue collar of blue collar.
Yeah, it definitely was. But as like a 20-year-old, right? It was me and my buddy, and we were hard workers, and like we always went to the gym together. We're like, yeah, let's just go put some pipe in the ground, and like we'll do all the welding ourselves. And so, I mean, it was exciting stuff at the time. And we raised it. Well, we didn't raise it because it didn't hit the account, but we had people who were willing to move forward with it if we were going to. But he backed out last minute, went and got his MBA because he was worried about being a blue collar boy.
All right, so like that is just, to me, that's like the number one statement I have of this whole thing is like, you can just do whatever you want. Like, and that's the thing that like didn't really, like took a minute to click. Like after I bought the business, I like kind of went and rewinded in my head, and I was like, what just happened? Like, how did I just buy a business? I think when I closed, we had like 32 employees. I'm like, I know nothing about plumbing. And I did not put in much of my own money. And like somebody was willing, like the grownups at a bank were willing to like let me do this. Like it felt like I should have been asking somebody permission, but instead it was just like I decided I was going to do it and I did it. And that's just like exactly what you're talking about with the well. Like you were just going to do it. Like
Yeah.
Have you ever drilled a well before?
Nope.
Beautiful.
But yeah, that's what it is, man. That's the fun part about life, right? Is you can just go out and do things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But awesome. So this, I'm not gonna say names. I'm pretty sure it's probably already closed already. But this turf business, artificial turf business, out of Florida. I picked one out of Florida for my boy Peter here, so that if you want to go close on this later, you can. Except it's probably already closed. 60% residential, which, that's what your experience was. But of course, with turf and with almost all home service businesses, there can be a commercial aspect to it, right? Sometimes even an industrial aspect. You look at roofs, you could do residential roofs, but you could also do commercial roofs, vastly different companies. Same with HVAC, you could do residential HVAC. You can do commercial or industrial HVAC, vastly different products. And so this is interesting. They did 60% residential, and then they did 15% commercial, which looks like office complexes, public areas, and rooftop gardens. So rooftop gardens was pretty interesting to me. I didn't realize that was such a market, but it kind of makes sense if you were closer to, the Miami area or, where all the condominiums are, that would be a thing, especially for dogs, right?
Yeah,
if you live in a condo, have a dog. And then the last 25% was stadiums, golf courses, and schools, which is cool. So really, really big mix of commercial, kind of sports oriented, and then residential.
That's interesting that it's such a small piece, because I would guess the dollar amounts on that are huge. Like if you're doing like a football field,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, I'm guessing that's like if you're doing a school or a stadium, like that's going to be like huge dollar amount. Low margin.
My guess though is like how many houses are there in comparison to schools that are putting in turf?
True.
Right? So you might get 1 or 2 a year, maybe 5 or 10 a year, but you're doing at the same time hundreds of houses. So even though it's 25% of the market, I bet it's a really small like actual customer concentration. It's probably 3 or 4 customers. They're probably GCs that you're building schools with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So super interesting. I found that kind of beyond just the residential push, I found that to be really interesting. They were, let me see, I want to say 800 in top line revenue.
Oh geez, that's a real
800.
Yeah, that's a real.
It's a job. Yeah. Oh no, sorry, 1.5. 1.5 in top line, 40% gross margin, which also surprised me, and about 10 to 14% in EBITDA. So gross margin surprised me. EBITDA is kind of in line with any home service industry. So that one actually didn't.
Well, that's interesting, because if you're making 40% gross margin, I wonder if that's after labor. Like, what are your other expenses other than yourself?
My guess is a big portion of it's still marketing. They do a lot of Facebook marketing. That was what I was told when I was working with them, is like Facebook was the key driver, more so than Google, more than LSA. And I found that to be really surprising. But it makes sense because it's such a visual product, right? Like you said, you walk out and you're like, oh, I'm really happy because it's so clean and nice, and it always stays clean and nice. But that's you know what I mean? It's like a visual aspect to something that,
you see the pretty picture of it and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's what, you can't. I mean, if you're searching for it, you're searching for it. But yeah, I'm sure there's a little bit of the, like, I'm sure there's a marketing term for it, like building the desire.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's 1.5 million is, scary territory. But I don't think you're going to find too many that are bigger than that at the same time.
Well, that's exactly what I was just going to say. Is I went before we did this episode, and so to ruin the fourth wall and to everybody who's listening's idea of what we do on this show, we knew we were going to talk about a turf company prior, but I went on BizBuySell and I looked at a few of these too, and Yeah, there was like one that was bigger than this one, and it was Dallas, 4.5 million, still for sale. But the rest were all like a million, and that seems to be for these like tier 2, tier 3 businesses, really where they kind of cap out. Cool. So interesting. Let me see. The other thing I found interesting in this is, I mean, in terms of like labor and just the entirety, it's all the same as HVAC. So it's so confusing to me that how similar it can be in terms of like, right, top line at 1.5, labor is the same percentage. I think they get hit pretty hard on their COGS with material though.
Yeah.
Because every job is a heavy material load, and then I'm sure there's some excavation and drains and quite a bit there too.
Yeah, there's definitely all these businesses fall into these same like size buckets. Like, there's just a ton of them. Like this 1.5 million size is one size bucket. The like can't break 3 million is the other bucket. And then like sometimes you get, you know, a little bit bigger than that, but I feel like those are like the big thresholds, because like you can run the $1.5 million business with you kind of being the only person. Like you're the center of the universe. You at that size, like you can still do the books, you can quote every job, you can manage every, you know, call gone wrong, all that stuff. The difference with the turf kind of thing is you're probably not dealing with at 1.5 million. I don't know. We got to do some math here, but like, I'm guessing that's probably like you're running like 2 crews or something. Like you're probably doing like 2 installs a day. So it's not like you're dealing with a field of service techs and each one's hitting all these different jobs. I'm guessing your day's like kind of steady and predictable. Like you wake up, you set up job number 1, you got a lead guy on job number 2, and you're quoting 3 jobs in between, and then you go check in the afternoon and make sure the customer's happy.
Exactly.
I'm
That's what I was going to ask you. How long did yours take, and how big was it?
What was it?
How long did your specific job take? Can you talk a little bit about the one that you got for your house? How many people were there? Did they show up in branded trucks? Like, that's what I'm curious about, because I bet much like, you know how like roofing, most roofing companies, they don't have their own installers. Like anyone who's installing your roof doesn't work for the company. It is a different subcontracted crew, and they usually have a project manager who stands on site and manages. So I'm curious, I bet they would, I mean, I could see something running similar in this industry, but then if it was like landscaping, I could also see them just being W2 employees. So I'm not 100%.
My project was,
what was your experience?
We did like a little, we did like half of our backyard. I'm trying to think of the square footage, but like it was small. It was like, I think it was less than 1,000 square feet. And I don't think they had branded trucks. Like, you know, it was a decent brand, you know, like professional looking stuff. I don't think it came through on like a House Call Pro or any type of software, but it was like, you know, professional looking business cards and stuff. I don't think anybody had remotely sophisticated apps or anything like that. Nobody
did they turn around an iPad and say, hey, here's your options?
But I did a fence job, I'll tell you about those. That went like that. But the turf thing, I don't think they had branded trucks or anything like that. And it was just like 6 dudes one day. Like just like 6 dudes working like 11 hours, hammered it out. It was, you know, it was pretty impressive.
That's a lot. I was expecting more of like a 2-man crew to knock that out, but 10, I guess they have to rip out all the grass. Did they have to drive an excavator or some kind of mini backhoe or something like that to
no, I don't
clear
think it
the
was
ground?
Big enough, and the grass was already removed.
Okay.
But now I'm wondering, are we going to do some unit economics on this?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, right?
They didn't have it. It wasn't 6 guys there the whole time, but they was there in the beginning. Like they were getting it like cleared out. Maybe some of them went to do something else after.
Well, like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if they're running 2 crews and then just like in HVAC or just like in plumbing, you do have like a crew is not consistent of all equal people. Some of them are better at, tear out, demo, rough in, finish work. And so I'm wondering, like, I need to dig into this more. I'm wondering if the turf business has a rough in, a tear out, and a finish crew that comes in and really keeps it nice. I'll have to talk to a supplier.
No, they might. I'm sure, because like the demo work, is probably, you're probably demoing and grading with a machine, especially like, again, my project was small, but my project, so it was about 1,000 square feet, and I think it was about $6,000. And so I just did 60 hours of labor at $20 an hour, and that's $1,200. So it's exactly 20% labor cost. And then your material cost is probably another, 30%, and that gets you to a 50% residential margin.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably what they're doing, right? You're probably doing like a 50, maybe 55% residential margin, and then the commercial stuff is probably, 40.
Yeah, and probably equal.
35.
It pulls you down 35 to 38 and pulls you down because it's a high ticket on a blended.
Yeah.
Super interesting. So the big question, if you got the opportunity tomorrow for a $1.5 million turf business to add onto your plumbing company that did 40% margins at 14% EBITDA, so $210K, and they were selling it to you at a 3x multiple of 600. Are you in?
I am so not into that. I think like
but someone is.
This is like a good exercise though, because like I'm a little bit of a hypocrite here, because I also preach big time, like buy lots of revenue. Like sure, EBITDA is great, but like buy lots of revenue. And I think is like one of those things where like if you have 1.5 million of revenue, like you just have no wiggle room to do anything. But I say that at the exact same time as I encourage people to like look at oddball small stuff where you could come in and just work really hard, and it's almost like a blend of a startup. Like if you go buy this business for 500 grand or something, like that's not like life ruining money if something goes wrong. You're buying it at a low multiple, and like so you can just kind of like throw your energy at it and a little bit of like bootstrap a startup energy, and you could turn this 1.5 million into something serious. So I don't know. I kind of like wear both hats on that.
Yeah, my problem is for 1.5 million though, the EBITDA margin is too low for me. So at 14%, like that's a lot of expenses that are hitting the bottom line, which I'm having trouble accounting for, because at a 1.5 evaluation, right, or 1.5 in top line, like realistically, your EBITDA or your SDE should be a little bit higher, unless you really did have all the systems in place and you're paying quote unquote for the service titan of turf, and you know what I mean? So there's not much room with 240 in EBITDA to, if something goes wrong or a downturn, or if you want to replace yourself with an operator, or you want to do any of these growth activities, like it really is scrappy.
Yeah. But that's why like you can't pay 3x for that. You got to pay like 1.5 to 2.
Unless you own a landscaping business and it's a tuck-in, then go for it.
There you go.
All right. The question I used to ask John when we used to do these that I loved, it's one of my favorite questions, is on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being a super easy business to operate and 10 being plumbing. No, I'm just kidding. 10 being like a really difficult business. How hard do you think it would be for somebody, like if you bought this business before you bought the plumbing business, how hard do you think this business would be to run successfully?
I don't know if it's like a grass is always greener thing, but I think like this falls into like this category. Like there's not that much going on in AstroTurf compared to HVAC and plumbing, right? Like there's no engineering happening, like, so I gotta imagine like if plumbing and HVAC is like a 7 out of 10, this has got to be like a 3 or 4, because I think you can, and here's why I say that. I think landscaping's probably pretty hard because the labor pool is brutal. I think with this, because it's project based and it's higher ticket, I think you can get away with paying people more. Um, or if you do like a, say like performance pay model for installers that a lot of people are doing in our industry, like I think that's my hunch is you can get like good talent and pay them well because you're doing high ticket sales versus landscaping. You're doing like mow and blow, bottom barrel pricing. That's all your recurring stuff. So you got to hire guys for like minimum wage. Um, I think you can get like decent talent is my hunch. And I think like your day to day is just kind of like you set up a job, you quote another job, you wrap up the job. Now I think your day to day might be more than an 8 hour day every day. That part might be different than the canvas business. I'm guessing you're working like 6:30 to 5:30 every day. Um, right. You're always going to be starting before your crews. You're always going to be finishing after they wrap up. But it just doesn't seem like there's that much complexity to it.
Yeah, I put it at medium competition, right? Not very hard competition, but I don't think it's the easiest of competition. I think that there is some competition from hardscape companies or landscape companies that do this. Like there is competition. It's not the PE, top tier, marking every keyword up to $600 to pay for each keyword difficult, but it's definitely something. So medium on competition, medium on labor pool, because like you said, they are a step above in skilled labor than just somebody who's doing blow and go. So that in itself makes it harder to find. But I don't think it is, hey, these guys are doing like really large excavation jobs or even hardscaping jobs where they're moving rocks around and planting trees and doing irrigation and doing lighting. Like this is just turf. So I think that's somewhere in the middle too. And then I love that it has a high price, high ticket, which can, you can do a lot with a high ticket point, especially for all jobs. And I'm sure there's a smaller service aspect where you go back and repair, fix, put new media down inside the grasses or inside the fake grass. So that's definitely part of it. But yeah, I'm going somewhere in the middle, like 4.5 to 5 on this one as well. I think that it's not going to be the easiest in the world, but it's not the hardest either. Good lifestyle business if you're young, especially, and you want to hustle and build something. I think that's right up the alley. Like you said, 500,000 is not going to end your life if it goes under, especially if you have a bunch of trucks and stuff. I mean, they'll liquidate and it'll suck. But
yeah,
that's where I'm sitting.
And I think if you come into it and you just copy the like home services playbook in terms of advertising, in terms of answering the phone, in terms of outbounding, in terms of giving options in front of the customer and pricing live. Because I went through the same thing with like I had a little fence project and I had the full experience. You call 4 people, 3 of them show up, 2 of them give you quotes, even though you follow up nonstop with the third one, never gives you a quote. But the one guy who gave me a quote, like, did it on the iPad, priced it live, gave me 3 options with financing and pictures of what I was getting. And it was like the same price as everybody else. And like the other guy, like the guy came to my house, spent an hour and a half with me. And then I followed up with him 3 times over the course of 10 days. He never sent me a quote. Like, I don't know how that guy's in business. But like, if you take that mentality and you put that on turf, like you're going to close more than everybody else and you're going to be able to spend more on leads than everybody else. And I think that's like the secret sauce. Like there is a playbook already for this. You just need to,
And that's for most tier 2 businesses. Like you said, fencing has become tier 1, roofing has become tier 1. They're all taking the same playbook and they're all starting to run with it. Very interesting. Awesome.
Jack,
so
wait.
Today,
what business have you found that's like, I said a 3. 3 is not fair. It's probably a 5. What business is actually like a 3 or lower?
I think the 3 or lower businesses tend to be, they're generally not in home services. But I think somewhere along the lines of if you were a very, very personable person and you were to get into something like lumber brokers, being a lumber broker, that is a very simple business, right? It's based on relationships, and it's based on you're a middleman who you're sourcing, specific types of lumber and specific pre-cut material, and then you're matching it up with builders, and that's who you're selling it to. And so if you have both of these relationships, or you can buy both of these relationships, and you're a very, very friendly, outgoing, networky type, I think you can do really, really well there. And it's not overly difficult. The guy who I was interviewing for, he went into work at, he said between 9 or 10. He had an assistant who did mostly everything for him. He had these relationships over a 30-year period. So he wasn't going out looking for more business. He was just ensuring that, the yellow pine that he bought got to the builder that wanted it at the time. And like, he had a really interesting niche market where he would sell pre-cut, the stair steps. I don't even know what that's called, but where the stairs go on. Yeah.
Oh, stringers.
And so he sold a lot of those pre-cut, and he sold them to from manufacturer to home builders. And so we had a huge Rolodex of these people. He had them calling him to get the wood, and then he would just call out as a middleman to the suppliers, give them that, and he'd leave at 1, go to the gym, and then go home every day. So he was like 9, 10 a.m. to 1 every day, and there was no overhead. That's what I was like, this is wild. Like, the overhead was his phone and his car. Yeah, it's like the weirdest ad backs. His gym membership, probably.
Every other person in that industry is so stressed, right? Like, the manufacturer is stressed, the lumber producer is stressed, the builder is stressed, and then this guy's in the middle, just like, I don't have any inventory, I don't have any contracts, I don't have any, right?
Yeah, it's like, sorry, there's no wood right now. Like, it's not my fault.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. And because I was talking to him too, close to after 2020, where like there was that big housing boom as well, and all like the material from China was scarce, and all the material in was scarce, just in general, housing material. So, I mean, maybe a time and a place, but also I think being a middleman in like the right business at the right time in the right place makes it for a really relaxed, easy business.
Yeah. It also sounds like there were a lot of ones and zeros that were government service providers that we're learning about now. Sounds like that was the secret about
right?
a few years ago.
Well, thank you, Peter, for coming on today. I really appreciate it. It's super interesting learning your perspective on, tier 2, tier 3 businesses, and why you think that they are optimal for buyers and have a lot of opportunity moving into the future. And awesome breakdown of a turf business. I agree with you. I think that it would be a great business for either a tuck-in or somebody who's willing to hustle and figure out how to implement the home service playbook into it. If you like what you heard today, leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen, and head on over to ownedandoperated.com to get some more information. Appreciate it, guys.